Hi guys, Dennis here, and welcome to my series on iOS development. This is part 2 of a two-part tutorial devoted to dealing with images. In part 1, we discovered how to capture images using iPhone's built-in camera, and also how to grab images that are saved to the iPhone's photo library. The problem we discovered is that we could potentially be saving huge images that we've taken with our camera. We decided that we needed a way to resize those images to a more efficient and manageable size. What we're after is a thumbnail version of our image, and that's what we're going to create in this video. So to fix our problem, we're going to create an Objective-C category file that will resize our images down to a thumbnail size. So what the heck is a category anyway? Well, a category allows you to add methods to an existing class that extends the functionality of that class. So we're going to add a method to the UI image class that will resize our images. Our new category will maintain all the properties and methods associated with UI image, but with the addition of a custom method that will write to create a thumbnail. The beauty of this is that we'll be able to call our custom method whenever we want to resize an image. Now there's a lot going on in this video that you've probably never seen before, a lot of code that'll look foreign to you, and you may not fully understand it, but don't worry about it. This is definitely code that you'll want to add to your snippet library. You'll be using it in most applications that deal with images. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. So here we are in our project where we left off in part 1. So let's do a quick review to take a look at what we have here. So go ahead and run this application, and what we have is a single view controller with a UI view container that holds a UI image view, an image, as well as a label that says pick photo. We've also added a gesture recognizer that will launch an action sheet when the user taps the photo. Now the labels that we have here are simply for decorative purposes. Okay, we can go ahead and stop this build. So the first thing we need to do is add a new group. And let's right click on that and select new group. And we're going to call this group categories. This is where we're going to place our new category. And now we need a new file, so let's right click and select new file. And this time we're going to select Cocoa Touch and make sure that you select Objective-C category and click next. And we're going to call our category thumbnail. And make sure it's a category on UI image. Click next and create. And this is how categories are displayed. Actually, we want to move these into our category folder here, like so. And this is how categories are displayed. It says the primary, which is UI image, plus thumbnail. So that's how categories are displayed in your project navigator there. So let's click on the header file, and obviously we need to add a custom method here. So our method is going to need to take a couple of arguments. The first argument is going to be an image, obviously, and the next argument that it takes is going to have to do with what size we want to create that image. So let's go ahead and build our method here, and our first, it's going to return a UI image, obviously, so we want to create that. We need a pointer there, and let's just call this create thumbnail. And then we need a colon. So our first argument will be the image that we're going to pass it. And we need a pointer here. And we'll just call this image. And the second, we'll just put with side. And that's referencing the side information that we want. Obviously, a thumbnail is going to be a square, so we'll give it our side information, and we'll be able to use that to create our new image here. So the second argument will be a CG float, and we don't need a pointer for that, but we need to name it, and that'll just be called side. So there's our method. Okay, so before we go ahead and code our new method, let's jump back over to the did finish picking media with info that's in our add contact source file and add the code that we're going to need to call this new method. So we'll jump back over there, and we're looking for the did finish picking media. There it is, it's the last one. Okay, let's give ourselves some room here. So what we're going to need is, first of all, we need to decide what we want our thumbnail to be, and the size should reflect standard resolution. So I think we'll use, let's use 72 in this example, and you can play around with different sizes to fit your unique needs here. So we're going to go right in between the return here. Let's dress this up a little bit here. And we need to define, once again, our float. So that's a CG float, and this is our side, and that equals, and we decided we're going to make this 72 point, and we'll use an F for a float. Okay, next we need to incorporate and add the scale information to our float, and we get that from the UI screen main screen function. So we're going to use side, and then we're going to do something a little bit different. You probably haven't seen this before, but this is going to be an asterisk and an equal sign. And what the asterisk equals means is contains. So side contains the following. And we're going to use a couple of brackets, UI screen, and we're going to call the main screen. And we're going to use scale. Now I want to option click on scale so you understand what this is. Scale is in a normal display, the scale is going to be a 1. So our side would in fact be 72. But in a retina display, our scale would be 2. So that's going to multiply. It's a multiplying factor. So our side would in fact be 144. So we can option click on that and just take a quick look at it here. And as I indicated, this value reflects the scale factor needed to convert from the default logical coordinate space into the device coordinate space of the screen. And then it goes on to saying, for standard resolution displays, the scale factor is 1.0, as I indicated, and 1 point equals 1 pixel. For retina displays, however, the scale factor is 2.0, and 1 point is represented by 4 pixels. Okay, so we need a semicolon at the end of that. Alright, so now we call our custom thumbnail method and pass it the arguments, which is the side dimensions that we want to use. So let's use UI image, and we want to create a thumbnail. So we'll call thumbnail equals image, and then we call our image, oh, well, we forgot to do something here. We need to import that thumbnail. So let's go back up here to our import statement. And we'll do a quick import. There we go. We need to import that UI image plus thumbnail. So now we can go back down here, back to our method. And now we can call the create thumbnail. So it's asking us for 2 arguments here. The first one, of course, is going to be the image that we've gotten from our UI image picker controller original image here. So let's put image in here. And the second is with the side, and we've defined our side with our float right here. So we'll just put side, like so. And then the last item, self.imageview.image, instead of image, we want to return the thumbnail. So we're all finished with this method now. Okay, so we're ready to code our custom method. So let's jump back over to our category and take care of that here. So we need to jump over to our implementation file, and we need to add our method, of course. And that is a UI image, and then that was a create thumbnail. And then we're going to need some brackets, and we're going to need a little bit of room here, like so. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is define the size of our original image, and we're going to do that with an object called CG size. And CG size has 2 data points, one for width and one for height. So CG size. And we don't use pointers with floats or CG sizes, so we're just going to call this size equals image dot size. Now we got that image from what was passed to us right here. Okay, so next we need to create another CG size, and this one's going to be used for our cropped image, even though we don't have a value for that yet. So one more time, CG size, and we're going to call this cropped size. And that doesn't have a value yet, so we'll just end that with a semicolon. Okay, so here comes a pretty long explanation, so try to pay attention here. When images are displayed on an iPhone screen, they're drawn in a rectangle that is sized according to dimensions that we define, either in code, like what we're doing here, or through the interface builder. Remember that a square is really a rectangle with sides of equal length, and that's what we're after here. We want to create a square, which is what a thumbnail is. So to resize our image properly, first we need to reposition our image by modifying either the X or Y coordinate. Which coordinate we modify depends on which dimension is the largest, either the length or the width. If our original width is greater than our original height, then we need to modify our X coordinate. In other words, shift the image along the X axis or horizontally. If our original height is greater than the original width, then we need to modify our Y-axis. In other words, shift the image along the Y-axis or vertically. If we didn't perform this action on either the X or Y coordinate, part of our image would end up being cut off, either the top or one of the sides. So once again, we're basing which coordinate we're shifting on, which side we need to shorten. Remember, we want to make a square and use the shorter side of our original image as our baseline. So the first thing we need is two floating point values, one for our X and one for our Y coordinate. This represents the coordinates of our rectangle where our new image will be drawn. So let's create those and set their initial values to 0. So we need two CG floats, and this first one we'll call X, and that equals 0.0, and we need one more, and that's going to be for our Y coordinate, and that's going to be 0.0 for an initial value. So next, we're going to use an if statement to determine whether or not we need to update our X value or our Y value. If the width of the original image is greater than the height, we'll update our X value. If the height of the original image is greater than the width, then we're going to update the Y value. And if the image is already square, our if statement will simply be skipped. So let's go ahead and write our if statement here. And then we're going to key on, the first one is going to be if the width is greater than the height. So we use the size dot width is greater than the size dot height. Then we're going to execute the following two lines. And there's going to be two lines for each of these. And the first line is we're going to define our X coordinate, and how we do this is by taking the height and subtracting the width. So think of it this way, we're just going to write a subtraction statement backwards of this. So we're going to minus the height, take the height and minus the width here, and this first one is going to be for the X coordinate. So X would equal size dot height minus size dot width, and then we want to take that result and divide it by 2. Now we want to define our crop size, and we do so by making both the height and the width the same size as the smaller side of the original image, and in this case, in this first case, our smaller side is the height. So we'll do a cropped, there we go, crop size equals, and now we have to use a method called CG size make. And as I indicated, we want to make both values the same side as the smaller side. And in this first case, our smaller side is the height. So we do a size dot height for the first value and a size dot height for the second value. See how that makes a square? Okay, now we're going to use an else statement, and this else is going to represent, we'll put a little comment here, and that's going to represent if the height is greater than our width. So if it is, we want to modify the y. So we do a y equals, and then the parenthesis, and the size dot width. Remember, we're just going to do the complete backwards here, minus the size dot height, and then we want to divide that by 2 as well. And then the crop size for this one will be, once again, the CG size make. And this time, since the width is the smaller, we're just going to use size.width and size.width for both of these parameters here. Like so. Okay, so that takes care of our if statement here. Let's bring this up here. So we'll finish off that it, like so. So now that we have our data points resized to make a square, we'll use the method cgrecMake to draw a new rectangle to hold our image. The cgrecMake takes 4 arguments to define a rectangle, the x and y coordinates, along with the width and the height. We'll then assign the results to cgrec. And cgrec is a structure that contains the coordinates and size information of a rectangle. Remember that our x and y values are negative, so we'll need to multiply both of those by -1 to obtain a positive value. So don't forget to do that. So let's start off with creating a cgrec. And we'll need to use, there's so many of them in here, and we just want the cgrec by itself, so that's the guy we want right there. And we're just going to call this clipped rec. And to make this, we're going to use a convenience method called cgrecMake. And as I indicated a moment ago, it takes 4 parameters. So it's going to ask for x and y, and then the width and the height. And so remember, our x is going to be x, but we have to multiply that times -1, because currently it's a negative value, and we don't want that. And then the y, we have to do the same thing with the y, times -1. And then what we use for our width is going to be the crop size that we calculated up in our if statement, dot width, and our crop size dot height. So we'll take the first one first here, crop size dot width, and the last one is crop size dot height. Okay, so next we need to define a CG image reference object, and this object is an opaque structure that encapsulates bitmap information. We'll use the CG image create with image in rec method, and that's a long one, that takes 2 arguments, the image and the rectangle definition. So let's create a CG image ref, and that's the guy right there, and we'll just call this image ref. And to get that, we're going to use another convenience method called the CG image create with image in rec. That's a long one. So CG image, and we want the CG image create with image in rec, that guy right there. So the first parameter that we have to add will be a bracket, and we want to add image, and then we want to use the CG image. And our second parameter is going to be the clipped rec that we just created right above. Okay, so the image here was passed to us in our method up here, and the clip rec is what we just created in the statement right above that, if you're wondering where we got this information. Okay, so the next line. So we're done squaring and cropping the image. Now we need to redraw the image. So once again, we start with the CG rec, and this time we need to make our coordinates both 0, since our new origin is going to be in our UI view container, and the width and the height will be our argument that was passed to us in our original method here. So let's do a CG rec. And we just want the plain CG rec here, like so. And we'll just call this the final rec. And once again, we're going to use the convenience method CG rec make. And it's going to ask us, like I said, an X and a Y coordinate, and then the width and height information. And now we're going to do things just slightly different. Our X coordinate is going to be 0. Our Y coordinate is going to be 0 as well, because we're not worried about our coordinates really. It could really be anything, because we're going to dump this image into a container view. Now our width, we're going to use the side information that was passed to us in our method up here. So we'll just put side. And the height is going to be side as well, because we are making a square after all. Okay, so the last few lines of code are wrapped between what's called a bitmap context. It starts off with the method UI graphics begin image context. Boy, all these methods are so long, which takes one argument, the rectangle size information, which we just defined above. So let's create a UI graphics begin image context, UI graphics, and we want to use the begin image context, and it takes one argument, as I said. And what we're going to do is use the final rec that we just created above, and we're going to use the size property, like so. So before we finish up this method, let's backtrack a little bit and do an option click on some of these methods, some of these objects, and some of these convenience methods, just to get a better understanding of what we're doing here. So the CG rec obviously stands for CG rectangle here. And if I open it up, as I mentioned before, it's a structure that contains the location and dimensions of a rectangle, and includes the origin and size information. So the CG rec make obviously provides all that information so it can be wrapped up into one object there. And as I indicated before, we had to multiply our X values. Remember, we got those from up here because we subtracted the larger from the smaller, so subsequently we ended up with a negative number. Now we have to compensate for that by multiplying it by -1 down here. Okay, the CG image ref, let's option click on that guy and see what he has to say. Oops, I accidentally made a mark down here. Let me get rid of that. Let's option click on the CG image rep. And once again, as I mentioned, it's an opaque type that encapsulates bitmap image information. So where did we get the image information? Well, we got that from our method. It was passed to us. Where did we get the clip rec? Well, we created it in the statement right above that. Alright, now we needed to draw a rectangle once again. So if we were to option click on this guy, we've already taken one look at it. It contains an origin point and size information. So we made this our final rectangle, and we used the convenience method once again, the CG rec make. But this time we added 0 and 0 for our X and Y coordinate, because we wanted to go right into our top left-hand corner of our container view. So we want to make sure that that's 0 and that's 0. And then as far as our width and side information, that was provided to us in our method as well, and we got that back from the add contact view controller. If we jump over there, that's this information right here, the 72 that was passed to us in float form. Let's go back over there. Okay, so then we created a UI graphics begin image context, and let's option click on that guy and learn a little bit about him. And this creates a bitmap base graphics context and makes it the current context. So the next several lines is all about making a graphical image here, and it requires a size definition, and we use the final rec right here, and we use the size property in that final rec. Okay, I think we're caught up. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do will be creating a new image which is created in the current context. Remember, we started off beginning our image context here, so now we're going to follow suit and create our image. So we need a double bracket, and then we'll create a UI image, and then we want to do an image with CG image. Image with CG image, okay, and it's going to ask us for the image ref, and we created one right up here, so we're just going to use the image ref. And once again, I highly recommend that you use CodeSense in just about everything you're doing in here, because the methods are so long and some of them are so similar to one another that it's easy to get tripped up here. So now that we have that, we want to call on the draw and rectangle method. So we'll do a draw on rectangle, or draw in rectangle I should say, which is right there, and it's going to take one parameter, and we want to use the final rec right there, which has all our origins, or our the coordinates, and our height and width information. So we'll just put our final rec right in there. That statement's done. So now we need to grab our image from our context, and we've just made it here, and then assign it to thumbnail. So UI image, UI image, and we're going to assign this to thumbnail. And the way we get that is a UI graphics image, a get image from current image context. So there's the beginning one, so we want to scroll down here, and we want to get the get image from current image context, that guy right there. And what that's doing in this context right here, in these preceding two lines, we've created an image and added it to our context, and in this one we're just grabbing that image from the context and assigning it to the UI image that we've named thumbnail. Okay, and now we can end our context by using the UI graphics and image context statement. So we want to use the UI graphics, and we want to grab the and image context, that guy right there. And the last thing we need to do is return our thumbnail. Like so. Okay, so let's bring all this up and see where our error is, because we do have an error here. And our error is, oh, we're missing an ending bracket here. That's our error. That should take care of that, which it does. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for our method. Let's build and run and see what we have here. Okay, let's pick a photo, and we'll use our photo library. Remember, if we used our camera, we'd get an error here. Let's go ahead and we're going to choose, let's choose Taylor Swift here, and Taylor Swift appears all nice and properly formatted and cropped to size. Okay, so this is all well and good, but I want to walk through the whole couple of methods here in the debug mode, just so you see exactly what's happened, because I want you to know for a fact that this image has been returned and is a smaller size. So that's very important. So let's stop that, and we'll assign some breakpoints. So let's jump back over to the Add Contact View Controller M file, and we're going to go down to the did finish picking media with info, and let's start with adding some breakpoints here. And this is going to look kind of like overkill, but I just want to walk it through step by step so you really get a good understanding of what's going on. Now we can jump back over to our category, and we'll jump, let's see, I want to put a breakpoint, and we'll do one here. here. And I want to step through each of these because this is really a complicated one here, like so. Okay, let's build and run. And let's get this guy out of the way here. And let's pick a photo. And who should we use? Let's use Sarah Evan. Okay, so let's see where we stopped off first. Pick her dismiss view controller. Okay, well we can step through that. We don't need to look at that one. And let's step through this now. Alright, let's go to our image. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but when you mouse over your variables in cases of an image, it gives you a little eyeball here, so you can click on that, and that's going to open up the actual image. And as you can see, this is a full-size image. Okay, let's get out of that. Now, what have we done next? Well, we've said, all right, we want our sides to be 72. Okay, let's step through a couple more here. Okay, so here is our thumbnail, and we couldn't look at this now because we haven't stepped all the way through it here, but it's not really necessary because all we're going to do is we're wrapping it up and we're passing it to our new method that we just created in our create thumbnail. So let's go ahead and continue stepping, and now we get to the good stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at the image that was passed here. So let's mouse over that, and we can take a look at it, and we'll see that it is a full-size image of Sarah Evans here. Okay, and let's take a look at what our size is. Now our size we haven't gotten yet because we need to step through it, so let's step through it here one more time here. And now we can take a look at our size. And our size, and let's write that down here, is the width is 500 and the height is 590. Excuse me. Okay, so what does that mean? So width, what is the bigger one here? The height is the larger image. So are we going to look at this first one? Is the width bigger than the height? No. So we're going to skip that and we're going to go down to the second one. We need to make a change to our y coordinate because our height is greater than our width. Okay, so let's step through this. Let's step through it again. Let's step through it one more time here. Okay. Now crop size. Now you'll notice that our height was bigger than the width. So what did we do? We took our width, which is the smaller size, and subtracted the height, which was the larger size, and divided it by 2. And then our crop size, we used the width and the width because our width was the smaller size here. So if we hover over crop size, we'll see that it's now changed to width 500, height 500. And if we were to click on here, we'd even get a visual indication. So our image has changed now. It's 500 by 500 instead of 500 by 590. So we're making some progress here. So let's step through it one more time here. And let's actually step through it again here. And now let's hover over the image ref here, and let's click on that and see what it gives us. Gives us the same size image here, so we really haven't done anything yet. Let's step through it one more time, and let's go through the final rec. So you'll notice now that our origin is x is 0, y is 0, and the size has changed to 144 by 144. Remember, our information, our side information that was passed to us, if we mouse over this side up here, is 144. It was originally 72, but since we're using a retina display, it automatically doubles that. You recall that that's the scale factor. Okay, so if we were to hover over that one more time here, and if we click on here, we'll get a little indication. Oops. Let's click on our little eyeball here. And our indication is 144 by 144, and our x and y coordinates are 0. So we have a visual indication in addition to this information here. It's also contained down below in our debug window, incidentally. Okay, let's continue stepping through here. So now it says we want to redraw our image. We can step to here one more time, and let's do it one more time here. And let's take a look at what our thumbnail looks like now. We'll open that up, and all of a sudden now, look at the size of our thumbnail. It's truly coming to be a thumbnail. And the last thing, of course, we return the thumbnail. So we'll step through that. And we don't really need to do that. We can just relieve these breakpoints and go to the end. And then Sarah appears. So I'd like to do this one more time, and this time we're going to use a truly big giant image here. So let's click on that. And actually, before we do that, let's activate our breakpoints once again. We're going to have to run this again here. And I know our default image is Steve Jobs, and that's the image that I want to use. Now, since we've loaded it into our container view, it automatically formats that, but it's still quite a bit, it's a big giant picture, so we want to size that down. So let's, and I'll show you what I mean here in a moment. So let's click on Steve Jobs, and we're going to just step through this just like we did before. And let's take a look at what this image truly looks like here, and we'll open it up. And as you can see, this is a portrait image, but it's quite a big image here, especially from left to right here. So let's go ahead and continue walking through it here, and let's jump over to our method here. And once again, we'll look at the image there. And so that's the true size of it. And let's step through a couple of these. And the size, we want to take note of the size here, so let's mouse over that. The size is 640 by 360, so we'll write that down. So the width is 640 and the height is 360. Okay, so let's go down here and step through this method. So this is going to fire off the first method because our width is greater than our height, so we're not going to use the second part of the statement. We're going to use the first one and make an adjustment to the x coordinate. So let's step through this, and now we can hover over the crop size, and we've resized that to width 360, height 360. Remember, we're making a square, so we want both width and height to be the same. And we can click on that eyeball there, and it gives us a visual indication of the height and width right there. Okay, let's continue on here. And now we have a clip rectangle, and there's our origin is x is 140, y is 0 with the size width 360 and height 360. And if we were to click on that, we'd get a picture once again along with origin information. Remember, we need to shift our image now. We can't just crop it into a square. We need to shift it around so it appears even in the square. Okay, let's continue on. And let's go one more time here. So let's take a look at our final rectangle, and now we have an origin of x is 0, y is 0, and the width and height have been reduced to 144 by 144. That's the information that we sent it. Remember, we said that our side was going to be 72, and our scale factor, in the case of a retina display like what we're using, is going to be 2. So it multiplies it by 2. We click on our eyeball and we get a little visual indication, 144 by 144, with our coordinates right above here. So let's continue stepping through. And now we can take a look at our thumbnail. And we'll open it up. And lo and behold, our thumbnail is much smaller now. Now, you can see what I mean by the X and Y origin. If we didn't adjust those, then this image would be severely cut off. We wouldn't be able to see half his face here. We wouldn't want to do that to Steve. Okay, so we can step through here and step through, and we can step through here. We don't need this. Matter of fact, we can just take our breakpoints off now and go to the end, and we should have a nicely formatted, much smaller image now in our add contact, much better than what we originally had in there. Even though it looks identical, it's much smaller. So yes, indeed, our custom method has returned a resized, nicely cropped image for us to display. And now if we were saving this view using core data, for example, we'd be saving a much smaller image, which obviously is a good thing. Now, some of the settings you can play around with to suit your own unique needs, especially the side float information in this guy right here. We could have passed an 88 or a 70 or even a larger number if we wanted. It all depends on what size we want as an end result here. So that wraps it up for this session. We've covered a lot of new information that you probably haven't seen before. The methods were long and complex, and that's a great reason to depend on code sense to keep you out of trouble, especially when the methods are very similar, as in the case of working with images. The good news is that you should copy the method that we wrote in our category and add it to your code snippets. Then you can use it whenever you want and feed it the parameters required for each application. So if you like what you've seen, give me the thumbs up. Your comments are always appreciated, and please don't forget to subscribe.